For decades, Hollywood's biggest stars hid their true selves behind perfect marriages, glamorous careers, and carefully crafted images. But what was really happening behind the scenes today? We reveal 35 famous faces whose sexuality became part of Hollywood's biggest secret, separating fact from rumor. Some names will surprise you, and a few may completely change how you remember these legendary stars. Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins will forever be remembered as Norman Bates, the troubled character who made Psycho one of Hollywood's most enduring psychological thrillers. But behind that unforgettable screen image was a private life shaped by secrecy, complicated relationships, and the pressures of an unforgiving Hollywood. Perkins married photographer and model Barry Berenson in 1973. The couple had 2 sons, and their marriage was described by people close to them as loving and genuine. Yet before and during his marriage, Perkins had relationships with men, including a reported affair with actor Tab Hunter. For much of his career, he kept this part of his life private because openly gay actors faced serious professional consequences. Charles Weinkauf's biography, Split Image. The Life of Anthony Perkins explores this hidden side of Perkins' life and the difficult choices he faced. The book describes a Hollywood where gay actors often live double lives, carefully arranging discreet meetings while maintaining a heterosexual public image. For Perkins, protecting his career sometimes meant keeping his personal identity almost completely out of sight. His struggle became even more painful when he was diagnosed with HIV. His illness was kept private until it was publicly reported near the end of his life. Perkins died in 1992 at the age of 60 from AIDS-related pneumonia. Today, Anthony Perkins is remembered not simply as Norman Bates, but as a gifted actor who lived during an era when being honest about his private life could come at an enormous personal and professional cost, while leaving behind a legacy that continues to fascinate generations of movie fans and remind us how different Hollywood once was. Richard Pryor and Marlon Brando. In the 1970s, 2 of Hollywood's most unforgettable figures, comedian Richard Pryor and actor Marlon Brando, reportedly shared a brief intimate relationship, something that remained largely private for decades. The story gained renewed attention in February 2018 when Jennifer Lee Pryor, Richard Pryor's widow, confirmed that her late husband had been intimate with Brando. Her comments followed an interview with music producer Quincy Jones, who mentioned Brando among several famous men he claimed had been sexually involved with Pryor. According to Jennifer, Richard had never been ashamed of his experiences with men within his close circle. She said he had even written about some of his relationships in his personal diaries. For Pryor, whose comedy often challenged American ideas about race relationships and social conventions, his private life was another part of a personality that refused to fit neatly into expectations. Pryor and Jennifer were married twice, first in 1981 and again in 2001, remaining together until his death in 2005. He had been married several times throughout his life and had 7 children. The revelation about Brando added another surprising chapter to Pryor's already extraordinary story. It also reflected the complicated and unconventional world of Hollywood during the 1970s, when many celebrities kept their private relationships far away from the public eye. For older Americans who remember Pryor and Brando at the height of their careers, the story offers a different perspective on 2 legendary entertainers who lived much more complicated lives than their public images suggested, leaving behind stories that continue to spark debate today and challenge how we remember these unforgettable Hollywood icons. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr became one of America's most recognizable television stars, best remembered for his commanding performances as Perry Mason, and later as wheelchair-bound detective Robert Ironside. But behind that confident public image was a deeply private personal life that remained largely hidden for decades. Burr married actress Isabella Ward in 1948, but the marriage lasted only a few months before ending in divorce. Years later, in 1960, while working on Perry Mason, Burr met actor Robert Benavides. Their relationship grew into a close, lasting partnership that continued until Burr's death in 1993. Because Hollywood in the 1950s and 1960s was far from accepting of openly gay actors, Burr carefully guarded his private life. He sometimes gave reporters elaborate stories about marriages, a wife who had supposedly died in a plane crash, and even a deceased son. These stories were later shown to be largely fictional, created to protect his career and personal privacy. Away from the spotlight, Burr and Benavides built a life together. They shared business interests, purchased property, and eventually established a vineyard in Sonoma County, California. Benavides remained an important part of Burr's life until the end. Raymond Burr died in 1993 at age 76. Today, his legacy extends beyond his legendary television roles. His decades-long partnership with Robert Benavides offers a glimpse into the private life of a man who spent much of his career hiding an important part of himself from the public while quietly building a life filled with loyalty, companionship, and lasting devotion. Their story also reminds us how many Hollywood stars sacrificed personal openness simply to protect their careers, reputations, and the people they loved most. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was one of Hollywood's ultimate leading men, celebrated for his rugged charm, confidence, and legendary roles in films such as It Happened One Night and Gone with the Wind. Married 5 times and the father of 2 children, Gable was widely known as a womanizer. Yet behind his carefully cultivated masculine image, rumors about his private life occasionally followed him. One of the most persistent stories involved actor William Haynes, one of Hollywood's best-known openly gay stars of the era. Haynes and Gable moved in overlapping Hollywood circles, but claims that the two had an intimate relationship have never been firmly established by reliable evidence. Another frequently repeated story connects Gable to director George Cukor during the production of Gone with the Wind. According to later accounts, Cukor allegedly made a remark about Gable's relationship with Haynes, angering the actor. Gable strongly disliked Cukor and supported his removal from the film, although the exact reasons for their conflict remain disputed. Gable's private life was filled with relationships and speculation, but he rarely addressed rumors publicly. His marriage to Carole Lombard was especially important to him, and she is widely regarded as the great love of his life. In his final film, The Misfits, Gable also developed a friendship with Montgomery Clift. When Gable died in 1960, he left behind an extraordinary Hollywood legacy and a private life that remains surrounded by unanswered questions, rumors, and mysteries that continue to fascinate film historians and generations of devoted fans. His story reminds us that even the most confident stars could have private worlds the public never fully understood, especially during an era when Hollywood demanded carefully controlled images. Cary Grant. Cary Grant was one of Hollywood's most polished leading men, famous for his charm, sophistication, and romances with some of the era's most beautiful women. Yet for decades, rumors about his private life followed him, especially his unusually close relationship with fellow actor Randolph Scott. Grant and Scott met in 1932 while working in Hollywood and soon became roommates. They lived together for several years in a Los Angeles home that the press and Hollywood circles sometimes referred to as Bachelor Hall. Their friendship was close enough to fuel persistent speculation about whether their relationship was more than platonic. Both men eventually married women, and Grant went on to become one of Hollywood's most celebrated romantic stars. He also maintained a particularly close friendship with actress Grace Kelly, who famously became his co-star in several films. Over the years, writers and acquaintances offered conflicting accounts of Grant's sexuality. Some suggested that he had relationships with men, while others argued that the rumors were exaggerated by Hollywood gossip and the intense public fascination surrounding his friendship with Scott. One important correction is that the widely repeated claim that Grant admitted during a 1986 Barbara Walters interview, "I guess I am gay," is not supported by reliable evidence. The quote is often circulated online but should not be presented as a confirmed statement. Grant died in 1986, leaving behind one of Hollywood's most enduring legacies. His relationship with Randolph Scott remains intriguing, but much of what has been written about it is still speculation rather than established fact, reminding us how easily Hollywood gossip can blur the line between documented history and enduring legend, especially when the truth was carefully guarded for so many years. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift was one of Hollywood's most gifted and mysterious leading men. A 4-time Academy Award nominee, he became famous in the 1950s for performances that brought unusual sensitivity and realism to the screen. Yet unlike many stars of his generation, Clift fiercely protected his private life. Clift never married, and his romantic relationships remained largely outside the public eye. He was known to have been attracted to both men and women, although the details of his private relationships have often been debated by biographers. His close friendship with Elizabeth Taylor was especially well known. The two shared a deep bond, and Taylor remained one of the most important people in Clift's life. The 2018 documentary, Making Montgomery Clift, offered a more personal portrait of the actor, challenging the image of him as nothing more than a troubled, tortured Hollywood figure. Family recordings and recollections revealed a man who could be witty, warm, playful, and deeply intellectual. Clift also resisted the Hollywood studio system. Rather than surrendering complete control of his career, he often chose individual picture contracts and spent much of his time living in New York. He preferred privacy, literature, history, and a relatively quiet life away from Hollywood's constant spotlight. His sexuality was not something he publicly defined in the modern sense, but accounts from people close to him indicate relationships with both men and women. In an era when openly gay actors faced enormous pressure, Clift's refusal to conform made him unusual. Montgomery Clift died in 1966 at only 45, leaving behind a legacy of extraordinary performances and a private life that continues to fascinate audiences more than half a century later, inspiring new generations to revisit his remarkable career and complicated story. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, an Oscar-nominated leading man whose handsome appearance and effortless charm made him the ideal romantic hero. From Giant with Elizabeth Taylor to Pillow Talk with Doris Day, Hudson became the picture of the confident all-American leading man. But behind that carefully constructed image was a private life he spent decades protecting. Hudson married Phyllis Gates in 1955, but the marriage lasted only about 3 years. Gates later said she discovered that Hudson was attracted to men and confronted him about it. Their marriage eventually ended in divorce, and questions about Hudson's sexuality continued to follow him privately within Hollywood. Because openly gay actors faced enormous professional risks in the 1950s and 1960s, Hudson maintained a heterosexual public image for much of his career. Behind the scenes, he had relationships with men, while studio publicity continued to present him as a desirable bachelor. Hudson's life changed dramatically in the 1980s when he was diagnosed with AIDS. His illness became public in 1985, making him one of the first major American celebrities to be publicly identified with the disease. His diagnosis brought enormous attention to the AIDS crisis and helped challenge the fear and misinformation surrounding it. The documentary Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed later explored the contrast between his glamorous public persona and his complicated private life. Rock Hudson died in 1985 at the age of 59. Today, he is remembered not only as a Hollywood legend, but also as a figure whose life helped change the conversation about homosexuality and AIDS in America for generations of viewers who followed his career. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy was one of Hollywood's most respected actors, earning 9 Academy Award nominations and winning 2 Oscars during a career that lasted more than 3 decades. Yet behind his celebrated screen performances was a private life that has remained the subject of speculation for generations. Tracy married Louise Treadwell in 1923, and they had 2 children. Their marriage became complicated over the years, but Tracy remained deeply connected to his family. He also developed one of Hollywood's most famous relationships with actress Katharine Hepburn. Although they never married, their partnership lasted for decades and became one of the enduring stories of classic Hollywood. Rumors about Tracy's sexuality have occasionally appeared in books and articles, including claims that he had relationships with men. However, there is no reliable evidence establishing a long-term romantic relationship between Tracy and actor John Dierkes. His daughter Susie Tracy also rejected claims that her father was gay. Tracy's private struggles were better documented. He battled alcoholism and periods of depression while maintaining an extraordinary professional reputation. Fellow actors admired his naturalistic style and emotional intensity, and Humphrey Bogart was among those who openly respected his talent. Spencer Tracy lived during a time when Hollywood carefully controlled the public image of its stars. That culture encouraged secrecy and left plenty of room for gossip to become legend. Today, the truth about Tracy's sexuality remains uncertain, rather than forcing him into a modern label. It may be more accurate to acknowledge what we know and leave the unproven parts of his private life as unanswered questions that may never be fully resolved even after decades of continued speculation. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. See you in the next one.